Hello, welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com at New Jersey Invitational, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. I'm Nick Miller alongside our 10-0 player, Eric Hawkins. How you doing, sir?
Doing great. Can't do it any better, right?
That is correct. You're doing as well as you can at this point in the tournament. 10 rounds in, 10-0. We got a sweet standard deck that we're going to talk about. Black-blue zombies. Not a ton of people on this archetype in the tournament left.
Yes, that's true.
Talk about this deck, and you know, you did pretty well with this at regionals, I believe, or a 10K recently, or a 5K, something.
There's so we have like a local cup qualifier thing, and kind of like a mini version of the Invitational, or like the Players Championship, I should say. And so I top 8'd that and did pretty well with that. So yeah, but basically, I got this deck playing the Pro Tour Gauntlet. Andre Strosky had built a deck just like this one, very, very similar. I kept boarding a couple of cards, so I decided to change the deck a little bit, but I felt like it had a great matchup against the rest of the Pro Tour Gauntlet. So. That's
right. Testing from the Gauntlet, you've switched up some of the cards into the main deck from the sideboard. I was talking to a Team Nerd Rage teammate, Matt Tickle was saying he just liked the pre-board version more. It's just been jamming that ever since.
Yeah, the
post board.
The post board, yeah. The Distended Mindbender is just so good in this format. All the Delirium decks are, you know, they start small, get big, so you usually get 2 cards there. All the Company decks obviously play guys that are smaller than Company and then Company itself, so you can usually pull 2 cards there. And you can get it out really fast. So I just was boarding in against that, boarding in against the Burn deck. Basically anything besides humans, but I ended up changing the sideboard where now I keep it in against humans sometimes.
All right, well, let's go over the cards. You've got the who's who's of zombies of the format. Of course, we've seen Prize Amalgam running around in Modern. Of course,
yes.
You're going to be playing it in Standard as well. You got Crypt Breaker, you got Relentless Dead, Haunted Dead as your zombie core. And of course, you got Jace and this card. Well, Dan Pereira, we've seen you do serious work with this on camera.
Yeah, the Voldaren Pariah is the reason to play this deck. Most decks are float in that mid-range area. They're not going to get very wide. So Voldaren Pariah is usually a one-sided Wrath of God that gets a 6/5 flyer. And the synergies with the deck, like Haunted Dead, gives you 2 guys. If you get a Prize Amalgam trigger, there's your 3 guys that you can sacrifice. Not really hard to rebuild that same board state after you get the Voldaren trigger. So yeah, I mean, it's 100% the reason if you want to play this deck, you want to beat up on all the mid-range decks, that's the reason, is Voldaren Pariah.
Even in your match against Tom, when he was flooding the board with creatures, you were still able to just whittle them down enough with multiple of these activations.
Yes.
Of course, flipping it into the Abolisher, also very good.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, 6/5 flying is just insane, right? That's such a fast clock. It's going to be bigger than 90% of the format. Anything besides maybe Emrakul. It even trades Elder with Elder Deep Fiend, stuff like that. So
yeah, bigger than the dragons.
Yep.
Those things. All right, so go over the core of this deck and how this deck functions, because there's a lot of cards with a lot of text.
So your keeps basically depend on having a Madness Enabler, because Hunted Dead, Prize Amalgam is the core of this deck. So you want to keep cards like Crypt Breaker, Jace, or Collective Brutality is the last Madness outlet. Geist's Reach Sanitarium is another way to do it, but it's a little less dependable and it's a lot slower.
Yes.
So you need to keep cards like Grasp of Darkness or something like that, something to interact in the beginning of the game. But any hand with Crypt Breaker or Jace, you can basically keep.
So you want your Madness outlets, you get your payoff cards into the graveyard, then you start synergizing from there.
Yep.
Of course, you got a slew of removal here. Grasp of Darkness, Ruinous Path, Collective Brutality, but also a Madness outlet, as you mentioned. This card here we spoiled on Star City Games, Dark Salvation.
That card is great. Basically, there's not a ton of removal, especially with Bant Company being one of the biggest decks. They only have Reflective Mage and either Jamoka's Command or Declaration in Stone. Dark Salvation is going to be on for 1 mana a lot of the times, but if you can pay 2, or if you can pay X is 2 or X is 1 even, you're going to get a lot of value for that card.
Right. Liliana here, great synergy, not only killing creatures, but also bringing back this horde of zombies.
Oh yeah.
You get to create chains, I imagine, with all the things that are happening here.
Yeah, Liliana is actually very great in bringing back enough cards to discard for Haunted Dead, so you can always have 2. But one of the biggest things is this deck is great at blocking and just jamming up the board. and being very resilient. So there's been a lot of times where you can just defend Liliana with like a Haunted Dead and then just get off her ultimate. And I mean, her ultimate's always great.
Sure.
But in this deck, you already have zombies. So you can just like start with like 6 zombies on her trigger.
Right. An already great ultimate made even better because you're a zombie deck to begin with.
Yep.
And then, of course, you know, you already mentioned Dismay Mindbender, but this card just seems so good with what you have going on in this deck, being able to rip apart people's hands and have a huge beater too.
Yeah, that is like one of the things, actually the size of it is one of the things that I really, really liked. Most of you, as you can see, most of my stuff is very small, very, you know, it's resilient, but they're not going to do a lot of damage. So like if they can handle your Prize Amalgams, Haunted Deads, I wanted another guy that was just big and could like fight through your Sylvan Advocates and stuff like that.
So the games you're winning with this deck, are you doing it with a bunch of little zombies, or are you doing it with the big payoff creatures?
Usually it requires either a Distended Mindbender or a Voldaren Pariah, but like the way that you stay alive and you keep the game going is the Prize Amalgam Haunted Dead.
All right, sounds good. Let's take a look here at the sideboard. Got a bunch of cards here. We got more Collective Brutality, Kalitas. I imagine that's a problem card on the other side of the matchup as well, but good as well for yourself.
This is like one of the reasons that there is so much removal is like Kalitas like stops this deck pretty hard. So you need to be able to make sure that post-board, if your opponent has access to Kalitas, that you always have a way to kill it. But that being said, if I was to ever play a mirror match or just like a deck that's like interacting with its graveyard, like Kalitas is very good there.
Sure. You got discard spells between Duress and Transgress the Mind. And negates, I imagine these are for controlling matchups?
Yep, or like the blue-red burn deck is like, you can usually beat cards like Fevered Vision because you get to discard so many cards, but I mean, they still have, you know, very powerful cards like Collective, the red Collective card.
Defiance, I believe.
Defiance, yes.
And we got more Emerge cards here. We got the Wretched Gryff and then Kozilek's Return, which I guess allows you to store to create your own what the Teamer Emerge deck does, which is Dismay Mindbender or the Gryff along with Kozilek's Return.
Yep. So this deck does go through a lot of its cards, so you do get to see a bunch of them. So like, I started with 6 Emerge cards that trigger Kozilek's Return and 4 Kozilek's Returns. But then I like narrowed it down so it's 5 and 3. So it doesn't happen a ton, but against the Bant Company decks, they can't really do a lot to stop that. And so it just like beats up on them a little bit more. Against Tom yesterday, I boarded it in on the draw because I felt like one of the ways that I could beat him was just cheesing him out with a little bit of the K return with the Emerge guy.
Sure. So where do you find this deck position in the metagame, and where do you see it going forward?
If Bant Company stays like one of the big decks, I think this deck is great. If things like Black-White Control catch on, then this deck is not at its best. They have a lot of exile effects. But this week there's just so much Bant Company that this deck just feels amazing.
All right. Well, you're 10-0. The winning end rounds will be coming with this deck, so we'll see how it performs down the stretch. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in New Jersey.